I think I could help just a little bit in trying to respond to both Commissioner Diaz-Del-Portilla's questions as well as a couple of the comments by Commissioner Reyes. So first of all, you should simply know, and I'll confine it to testing, we can come back to some of the other subjects. So we started pushing to get swab tests the 1st of April. We did not want to go with the rapid test because the rapid test, we believed in the first 3 or 4 days, can oftentimes lead to a false negative, and we didn't want to do that, and we felt like it was important enough to test 100% of our homeless population, both sheltered and unsheltered. So we began. We started with receiving 144 and 100 swab kits, part of the nasal, part for throat swabs. We deferred on 144 of them, took the first 100, and started testing April the 10th. We have now established 3 mobile testing teams. We've got the Lazarus team, which we call Team 1. We've got the Camilla's Health Concern, which we consider team number 2. And then our third team is Team 3, which is run by a woman by the name of Jackie Master, who was a former Jackson person that retired last week. She has run the clinic at the Homeless Trust Chapman number 1 center on North Miami Avenue. Retired. We brought her in so that she could begin running this third team. We are testing both sheltered and unsheltered, but our main focus has been on the over 65, those with the underlying symptoms as a prioritized basis. The week of the 14th, Commissioner Diaz-Del-Portilla, we tested 77 individuals. The second week, which is week of the 27th, we tested 72. I went out with our team a week ago, 2 weeks ago today. I needed to understand better why it was taking us as long to perform those tests, Commissioner Diaz-Del-Portilla. I didn't understand why we had some days where there were 6 or 8 people. I got a very firm, clear understanding that day. First of all, close to half or more refuse to test. They don't want to test. Some will agree to test, and when you start with the swab, because of some of the conditions that many of them have, they jerk back and won't let that swab go 2 inches up their nose. That day, I realized that we had some people that were like that, and we didn't have, with the Lazarus team that day, throat swabs. We needed to make sure that the team, if you had someone that couldn't take the nose swab, could take the throat swab. So now the teams are equipped with some of both. The third week, Commissioner, week of the 28th, we performed 210 tests. And to the question, Commissioner Reyes, that you asked, I cannot tell you that an individual that's living behind Macy's, that they have had a street address in the city 6 years ago when they became homeless. Because we don't gather all that information, but 100% of these were performed in the geographics of the city itself.
Oh, that's what I want to know.
That they were 100%. Now, your second question, Commissioner, dealt with, were they at Jose Marti Park? Were they behind Macy's? Were they at Bayfront? Okay. If that wasn't, because I was going to have to go back and extrapolate out some information for you.
Then let me clarify this, Mr. Brooke.
Yes, sir.
What I'm saying is that you heard me mention Jose Marti Park, because I mentioned Jose Marti Park in reference to the amount of homeless that Commissioner Carollo is experiencing, because I said it very clearly that this is not a single district problem. It's a city problem, and every single commission, district, it is has a homeless problem, and you should know that. I mean, this is not a city problem. I mean, one district problem. It is a city problem. As a matter of fact, it's a county problem. And What we are now, what we are dealing here is with those homeless that are within our city. And I do agree that we should, instead of being concerned with this, I think that this should be incorporated to all the cities in Dade County, that they should be taking active, being active in the process of identifying or trying to develop some procedures or a policy in order to deal with this uh, homeless problem that we have in Dade County. But definitely, we in the city of Miami, we have the biggest burden because some of the cities, and you, I mean, I haven't seen it, but I've heard that some cities they dump the homeless in our cities, see, in the city of Miami, and that's why I wanted to know, since we have the largest population, I wanted to know how many they were within our city, not because it is also not the part of them. Okay?
I'm going to come back to Jose Marti in a few minutes.
Yes.
This current week, which is week 4 of our testing efforts, through yesterday afternoon, we have tested 63 this week. We've got a total recorded of 422, plus another 100 or so that you heard Mr. Vickers speak of. What I also want you to understand is of the 26 positives, I'm sorry, yes, sir, Commissioner?
Yeah, Commissioner.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Book, but
That's okay, sir.
you've tested 535, but you said a few minutes ago that a lot of these people don't want to be tested, but 535 seems to be a pretty high number.
Actually, it is a high number, Commissioner.
Well,
It's
fine.
over 10%.
Well, it's not over 10% of the
Total.
of the total. So of the 535 were tested, how many refused to be tested? What number? How many refused to be tested?
The number that refused to test was, give me a second, I've got that number, Commissioner, and I apologize. It was, I want to say, and it was 50,
Okay.
it was about 50, give or take, almost half, Commissioner, that wouldn't. We only have had 26 total positive, and to the best of my knowledge, we have none that are hospitalized.
No, wait. We have 18 positive, according to Mr. Vickers. 18 positive. You said that a large number refused to be tested, but at the same time, it's already been stated that we have 535 that have been tested. If we have a universe of 700 or 650, if we have 535 tested, I don't see the high number that refuse to be tested. 50, maybe 10% refuse to be tested. To me, that's not a high number.
That's right.
The real question is, and you went through the different weeks that you were testing, but when did the crisis start and when did you start testing? If only 10% refused testing, why wasn't this testing done earlier and in a more vigorous way? Why didn't we try to identify the issue early on when we knew we had a population of, well, 1,100 countywide, but 650 or so in the city of Miami? We knew that we had to test them. We knew that was imperative first things to test them so we can isolate them and give them the medicine they need and the help they need, and to protect them and the rest of the population. So the most important thing was the testing. You talked about acquiring 120 swabs here and 100 swabs there for the nasal test, the throat test. You went back and forth on that a little bit at the beginning. My question was, why wasn't there a more vigorous effort in the beginning, from the beginning, to test a relatively small number of people? I know that we've done in the city of Miami. We've had a number of situations. We had buildings that we had to send crews into, what we call our fire rescue SWAT team of testing, and we went there and we tested 120 people, 140 people in 3 hours, in 4 hours. Why wasn't that done with a very vulnerable population that has pre-existing conditions, that can spread the disease amongst themselves, that has a low hygiene and other problems associated with that population? Why wasn't that done immediately?
All right, well, first of all, let me touch something you touched but didn't ask. We actually began our efforts way ahead of everybody else. We began back on February 27th on the streets downtown with our education materials, masks, hand sanitizer, sanitizing wipe, social distancing message. We started to ask for tests, Commissioner. There were no test kits. We couldn't get them. none of the other test sites could get them. The reason why statewide there was a slow ramp up was the state couldn't get the swab kits. They had test kits, but no swab specimen gathering kits. When the state got from the feds is when we ramped up. And we ramped as fast as we could. And Commissioner, I will tell you that we are the only homeless continuum in the state and likely the country with an aggressive testing program and the only ones trying to hit 100%. And when we get to the post period, we've got another additional strategy for testing post that we believe will benefit us as a community, if you will, when there's blowback. And not if, but when it comes. So I can simply tell you, we've been getting test kits faster than most of the other test sites in all of Southern Florida. And I spoke to Director Moskowitz again yesterday. He assured me in another 4 days, we will have another 500 of those kits on their way to us. We have asked for not fewer than 3,500 total. We've got just over 1,000 already in our possession or have been utilized.
Okay, so you have the most aggressive acquisition of testing kits, yet you really didn't start your testing till the last 2 weeks. And
No, sir, we started 4 weeks ago.
According to your numbers, hold on.
No, sir, 4 weeks.
Hold on. On a weekly basis, you told me 2 weeks ago, the last week of April, I'm sorry, you tested 230 something people.
That was week 3, sir.
Week 3, the last week of April 21st, April 22nd. When did you test the 200 something people?
The 210 were tested last week, Commissioner.
Last week.
The
Okay,
week
so that's
of the
May.
27th.
Hold on. You've tested a total of 535 people.
Yes, sir.
210 of those 535 were tested last week.
Yes, sir.
So I mean, the majority of them, an overwhelming number of them were done the last week. What happened in the month of April?
The first week of our testing, 4 weeks ago, we tested 77 individuals. Week 2, when we tested 72, a bunch of those tests had to be thrown in the garbage can. Unfortunately, they were gathered improperly. The gatherers used, I don't have all the detail as to what contaminated those specimens, but they went in the garbage can. So we don't take credit for something tested that was thrown in the garbage can. That would be misleading to you and the community as a whole. So I can't tell you that it was 50 or 60 specimens that went in the garbage can, Commissioner, but there were several dozen that went in the garbage can.
All right, so 77, 72,
210 and 60.
24 that you threw out. No, so it's 120 or something. The point is that since we had the debate last Thursday, and I'm not a cynical guy, Mr. Book,
I know that, sir.
but in the last week of your total testing, almost 40% was done in the last week since we first had this conversation last week. So it appears, if I were a cynical guy, that there was a major ramp up the last week in testing once the public questions were raised about the lack of testing. And
Commissioner, with all due respect to you,
and 40%.
we started 6 weeks ago to beg for the swab kits.
But 40%
As
of your
soon as
tests.
I got them, we put them into place.
But I understand, Mr. Book, but 40% of your tests were the last week. The other 5 weeks were 60.
Commissioner, they started, I think your commission meeting was on a Thursday, Commissioner.
It was.
We were testing a week ago, Monday that week. We got to 210 by working Monday through Friday last week. I'm not sure what point you're trying to make other than we have been aggressive, and the 10% testing of the total population exceeds the state average by 2 percentage points. And my staff has made clear to me that each week we screen hundreds of individuals, less than 50% will let us test them. So let me turn it to where I'm giving you that.
The only point, Mr. Book, the math doesn't add up. If you keep on saying that 50% refuse to be tested, yet you have 535 tests, and we have 635 homeless, the math doesn't add up. The math is that
Well, here's where you're
10%, not 50%.
We are testing, but remember what I said at the beginning. We test in shelter and on the streets, Commissioner. We test in shelter and on the streets, Commissioner. We had 165 senior citizens that were residing at Chapman, Camillus, Rescue Mission, Salvation Army, Loaded. Everybody that was 65 years of age or older were in our first group of priorities. We prioritized as we were suggested by the CDC and the State Department of Health. And when we bargained for getting as many of those kits as we can, we're informing them where we're testing. So we prioritize those 65, those over 65, and Commissioner, there were 165 total, and we worked to isolate them in hotel placements as well. And everybody we test on the street, we move into a hotel. All of them. So the answer to the question of whether or not we are.
Everyone that tests positive.
Or negative, Commissioner. We take them when they test. We don't know their results for 3 or 4 days.
Okay,
We
so
can't take the chance.
so that's what I want to know. So you test them and you put them in a hotel room. So
Yes,
you
sir.
have 535 people.
Yes, sir. And by the way, no, we have a lot of people that will ultimately agree to test, but won't go to a hotel. Commissioner, I had a 77-year-old man behind the south side of Jose Marti Park 2 weeks ago, today. I begged him. He was the last guy we tested. I begged him to let us take him to a hotel. He wouldn't go.
So let me stop in for one moment. I understand we have lots of questions for Mr. Book, but I want